We've talked about the idea of looking through the lenses many times, and we kind of said how you can look for opportunities, and that's what jobs is really about, looking for these kind of opportunities or where there's struggle and progress, the desire for progress. But I'd love you to share an example of looking at a business or an industry or uh, a, a product or service and actually see things entirely different than maybe previous competitors would have seen it.
Such a great question, and there's literally dozens of examples pop into my mind. I think, I might talk about Uber just because so many people talk about it as this tremendous disruption, and yet, you know, one of the reasons that disruption sometimes is criticized is because people use disruption almost like a bumper sticker to apply on anything that's different. When disruption is actually a very tight theory that applies in very specific circumstances and again applies specific phenomena. But Uber, in many ways, isn't disruptive at all to the short term or short haul transportation business. It's actually it's not it doesn't take root at the low end of the market. It actually took root at the higher end of sort of more demanding transportation buyers who were seeing, like, instead they were not only were they not using taxis, but they were using, say, black cars, as they're called in New York City, and fleet vehicles and chauffeur services. And so they were really, in many ways, like a sustaining innovation, not a disruptive innovation when it comes to transportation. Um, but the offerings in that category were perceived as so poor. Taxis were so unreliable and expensive and often dirty and unreliable. And especially if the weather was bad, you could never find one. Um, but Uber's not disruptive in that context, not at all. It is a sustaining innovation that actually targets the higher end and the more demanding customers of the market with a better offering. But you could say in another way that Uber was disruptive to labor markets and disruptive of other business models that were looking to hire inexpensive part-time workers to staff their particular businesses. So you can see how fast food businesses or a Starbucks or a Target or a Walmart might feel the pain of Uber coming into their market and actually offering a highly attractive value proposition to someone who's maybe a student and looking to work flexible hours for a certain time, a certain amount of hours given a week in a given week. And depending on how their class load is going, they might have more time or less time, and they would want to pick the hours. Wow. If I'm Starbucks or Walmart, that's a real threat that I have trouble to compete with, because I need people to work in my stores at these certain hours. And now I'm facing a threat that is exploiting, in many ways, asymmetries of my capabilities. It's very hard for me to say, "Oh, you want to work as a barista? You can work whenever you want." Well, that doesn't really work for Starbucks, because you might have 10 people show up for this slot and no one show up for that slot. And so you can see how, through the lens of the theories, Uber was not disruptive to the taxi, the black car market. It was actually a sustaining innovation that offered a better product to more demanding customers. But in many ways, it was quite disruptive of the labor models that were employed by many retail companies that were looking for flexible part-time workers. And suddenly Uber came in and offered a very different business model where I, as the employee, can suddenly choose my hours, right? And so what I think is so beautiful about the theories, and whether that's in this case disruption or jobs to be done, is it allows you to look at industry change and innovation. In this case, it's in hindsight, and see how a given company and a given business model took root, and in which areas of that market they were actually, say, a sustaining success, right? In the context of the taxi or the transportation market, Uber was really sustaining innovation. But in the context of part-time job opportunities, part-time earning, Uber was disruptive to the models of many retailers. And that's really the power of the theory, is it allows you to see things in very different ways and then think about creating opportunities. Because in that case, if you want to go back, you could say, if you were to sort of reverse engineer the opportunity, you might not come up with Uber. But what you could see is, wow, there's a huge population of people out there that are looking for short-term, flexible ways to earn money. And today, gosh, maybe they're trying to get a shift here at Starbucks, or maybe work part-time as a delivery driver for Domino's. But you could see that if you spent time with those people, like, none of those solutions would have been very satisfying. It's like, well, I don't really have control over my hours, and I actually have trouble keeping the job because I can't meet the schedule, right? And so you would have seen a lot of frustration, a lot of energy for progress. You would have seen a lot of non-consumption where people say, like, I could benefit from working 10 hours a week, but I can't give you a fixed time, right? And so you might not have come up with Uber. You might come up with 10 other different ideas, but that energy for progress would have been palpable and something that many innovators could take advantage of.